Hey, welcome back to the Wide Right Podcast. Manny Navarro here for The Athletic, joined by Carlos Ledo of the MIA All Day Pod. It is Wednesday, January 8th, right around 1 p.m. And it's been about a month since you and I have done a show because the last time we did a show, Miami had just lost to Syracuse. We knew that they weren't making the college football playoff. We knew that basically the season was over and they'd be going to the Pop-Tarts Bowl to go play an Iowa State team that had won 10 games as well. Since then, Miami goes to the Pop-Tarts Bowl. Cam Ward breaks the Division One record for touchdown passes, sets it and keeps it, by the way. And then Miami continues to blow another
This
late
game's
lead
away.
with their defense, right? Giving it away to Iowa State and ultimately end up firing defensive coordinator Lance Guidry, which I think a lot of fans were certainly rooting for, Carlos. But so there's a lot that's happened in the last month. We're going to get to all that. We're going to get to your mailbag questions. We're also going to look ahead to the 2025 roster, look at some of the things Miami has done in terms of improving its secondary in the transfer portal. But Carlos, we got to start with what you're thinking about right now, coming off of what I just covered over the last month. Where are you as a Hurricanes fan, knowing 10-3, Pop-Tart Bowls loss, Cam Ward finishes as a Heisman finalist, fourth in the Heisman voting. When you look back at 24, what is your general sense and feeling?
Wow, it's a feeling of like an opportunity that slipped away. And I think like I tweeted when you talked about the Dolphins, it's like, bro, we are so used to getting kicked in the nuts that I permanently walk around with a cup around during football season because you know it's coming. Sooner or later, it may not happen early in the season, it may not happen in the middle of the season, but sooner or later, you're gonna get that swift kick to the nuts. Thanks to Miami football. Like the Dolphins have done recently, it's get to the playoffs and get trounced in the first round. Or this year not make it at all. With the Hurricanes, it's you get your hopes up, you think this team's finally turning a corner, then eventually they hit a losing streak, they hit a rough patch, and the season goes downhill. This year pretty much mirrored 2017. They started off 10-0 in 2017, and then ended up shitting the bed towards the end of the season, losing to North Carolina, losing the ACC title game, and getting blown out in the bowl game. This year was at least more competitive in their losses. It was tight games. They should have lost or they should have won, losing one score games, but shit the bed nonetheless. And you had all these things that went well for you. You had a 1,000-yard rusher in Damian Martinez. You had a Heisman finalist in Cam Ward. You had the number one offense in the country. You put up over 537 yards of offense a game, scored over 40 points a game. And we've often said that over the last few years that those are benchmarks for elite football teams, for football teams that want to be in the playoff, that want to compete for a national championship. Those are benchmarks you have to hit. But the defense was so it wasn't that they were just bad. It was they were bad in bad times, right? The timing of their terrible play couldn't have been worse. It got progressively worse as the season went on. It didn't improve. And then when you needed them most, like they could have been mediocre, but if they made stops when you needed them most, you would have been a one-loss team and been in the playoffs, right? You could have gotten in. You could have beaten Iowa State had they just held on that last drive. You probably could have beaten Syracuse if they would have held on that last drive and not pissed away a 21-point lead. If they hadn't pissed away a 10-point lead against Iowa State, they would have been a one-loss team. But it's all these things that play into it. It's not just how they play, but it's the timing of how they played. And it's disappointing, man, because you sort of look at things and you say, if you can't get to the playoff with Cam Ward, if you can't play consistently enough on one side of the football to make a playoff, a 12-team playoff now, or even make the ACC title game, then what's it going to take? How are we
Yeah.
going to get there? How much do you have to build this roster up for it to be foolproof, where you can just, put it sort of on autopilot to get into these high stakes situations and be an elite program again? Because right now there's no sign of it happening.
Yeah, it's basically it's almost as if you did read my column that I wrote today in the Athletic, Carlos, because that's basically what I said. I categorized this as a golden opportunity missed, essentially, because the ACC was not very strong this year. SMU, a first year program, in the league, gets to the ACC title game because you know what? They made the plays when they had to. They came back and they beat Duke despite missed field goals and a bunch of mistakes. They beat the teams that they were supposed to beat. They didn't have any hiccups. And yet Miami, what have we talked about for the last 20 years? This team has talent, has opportunities to win these games, but yet chokes, right? They don't deliver when they have the opportunity there. And look, there's been six quarterbacks who have been invited to the Heisman Trophy ceremony going back to 1984 from the University of Miami. Bernie Kosar, Vinny Testaverde, Steve Walsh, Gino Torretti, Ken Dorsey, and Cam Ward. And the only one that doesn't have a national championship to his name is Cam Ward. Didn't even make the playoff, as you said. Didn't even make the ACC championship game. And so that's going to sting for a long time. I mean, look, Miami's had two other first round picks at quarterback, Jim Kelly and Vinny Testaverde. Jim Kelly didn't win a national title, but he turned out to be one of the best quarterbacks in NFL history, right? Led the Bills to four Super Bowls. Cam Ward, I think there's a chance he could be the first overall pick in this draft, right? At quarterback. There's a chance. I'm not saying it's gonna happen, but there's a chance it could. And I think for a long time, unfortunately for Mario, people are gonna no longer call him a quarterback killer because he just proved he could run the number one offense, right? I think what they're gonna call him is just a disappointment. They're gonna say this guy can't win even when he has a great quarterback. And so we now turn our attention to what he's going to do in 2025 because let's face it, the quarterback that came into the game in the Pop-Tarts Bowl was not very good at all. Emory Williams was a disaster in that second half. Had passes deflected consistently, and there were a lot of people who were on the Emory Williams bandwagon before the bowl game, saying, "Oh, what's the point? You don't need to go get anybody in the transfer portal." Well, I think everybody feels quite a bit different today about Emory Williams maybe than they did prior to that bowl game, and so Miami hasn't landed a quarterback yet, Carlos. And you look at this roster, they've done some things to make them better. He's recruited well the last few years, but without a quarterback, it's really hard to have hope going into 2025 without a quarterback that can make plays for you. And so I know it's hurt them on the recruiting trail. It's hurt them in terms of transfer portal receivers. They were looking at the Zachariah Branch from USC as a guy who could potentially come here. He didn't come here. Noah Thomas was another guy that they were interested in from Texas A&M. He ends up going to Georgia with Zachariah Branch. So you missed out on some opportunities basically because you don't have a quarterback in waiting, and so that's going to be the big story. And let's not forget, you got to get somebody to come in here and make this defense a whole lot better because that was ultimately the Achilles heel of this team.
Yeah, and we thought maybe, or I said, if you can't land a quarterback that's worthwhile in the portal, spend that money elsewhere and make the roster elite at all their positions to help, Emory Williams take over and be at least a game manager where you can get the ball in playmakers' hands and not cost you games, right? Be efficient. But the way he looked in that game against Iowa State doesn't give you the confidence that he's capable of that. Even in the game he played against Florida State, where people were hyping him up when they jumped on that bandwagon, saying, "Okay, he's going to show us what he's got now in the bowl game." The guy was 8 for 20, right? And one of his touchdown passes was a miracle because two DBs ran into each other, and Jacoby George was able to catch the ball and run scot-free down the sideline. So it wasn't like a hellacious throw. It should have been an interception that ended up being a touchdown, fortunately for him. Um, but it's one of these things where I never trust a dude that doesn't throw the ball with the laces, bro. That's me. All right. Yeah, I wouldn't have offered this guy a scholarship had I known this guy doesn't throw the ball with the lace. He throws the ball bald, right, with no laces. That bothers me a lot. Just as somebody who's thrown a football his whole life, pretty much, until now, where I can barely raise my shoulder. Anyway, um, the point is, do you have somebody on that roster that you feel comfortable enough that going into the season can manage games and not piss them away? I don't know. I think if you feel strongly enough about Luke Nickel that you think, hey, we can roll in with Emory the first few games. If it's not too challenging, maybe you end up losing to Notre Dame, maybe you end up losing to Florida, or at least hang in there, and then you can salvage the rest of the season and finish 10-2, and have Luke Nickel take over the rest of the way at some point after he gets his feet wet. Then you do that. But if you think you have another window of opportunity where you want to score big and maybe make that playoff, or at the very least think you can compete for a national championship, because your roster's so good all the way around, then you got to go out there and find a quarterback. You got to find somebody because right now it's not on the roster. I'm not sure if freshman Luke Nickel can do it for you. The kid's really good. I think he's going to be excellent here at the University of Miami, but I don't know if he can jump in day one and be that guy. It's very difficult to do because even a guy like Dylan Raiola that came in with a lot of hype, it was difficult for him. He was up and down. And I don't think that sort of inconsistency is going to be enough for Miami to win. And you've seen a bunch of the guys that were 5 stars, number one quarterbacks in the country. It's not necessarily, plug and play right away. So we'll see what happens, man. But I think they still need to get a quarterback. If they can get a guy that's competent, a guy not necessarily like, a Mendoza. Had they gotten a guy like Mendoza, someone of that ilk, people said that Mendoza and Emory Williams were basically the same guy. You could clearly see now after Emory's performance, they are not. Mendoza is a better game manager. He's more accurate. He can throw the ball. He uses the laces. That helps. And he's a smart enough guy to figure defenses out and figure out where to go with the football, which is what you want. It just seemed like a labor for Emery to even figure out where to go with the ball. He was processing very slow and then inaccurate when he was trying to get the ball there. So I don't know, man. They've got to make some sort of move there, or else just decide to run the ball 50 times a game. Then
Yeah, I was gonna say that, the one thing that you can look at with Miami in terms of the future, and again, we're gonna dive more into the 25 roster in a little bit, but they averaged 5.7 yards a carry this season. Obviously Damian Martinez was a big part of that. He's the first 1,000-yard rusher Miami's had since Mark Walton was here in 2016. So he did his job, but they also had a really good offensive line in terms of run blocking. They were much better at that than they were necessarily at pass blocking at times. They've got four guys coming back, including Markel Bell, who started at left tackle for 5 games in terms of starters. They went out and they landed Brockermeyer from TCU, who was their starting center. So the
great
third year in
picking.
a row, you're going to have a new starting center. So, you're going to have a solid five, and you're going to have Jordan Lyle, and you're going to have Mark Fletcher back there, and probably another running back that I would suspect that they'll pull out of the portal as well to come in and bring a little bit of a veteran presence because they did lose a couple guys to the portal. But ultimately, this could be a very successful running team. A receiver, though, and quarterback are big question marks because while you went out and you landed C.J. Daniels out of LSU, have an extremely young receiver room, basically led by JoJo Trader, who started the bowl game and had a touchdown catch. So that's what you got in terms of guys that have produced that flashed. So a lot of work still to be done in the portal for Mario, including quarterback.
Yeah, I
On the
think they still need a guard though. I think they still need a guard. I don't necessarily trust Matthew McCoy, unless Cooper didn't have the best of seasons. And to me, when you take Cam Ward out of the equation, the running game is going to suffer because teams had to prepare for them to air out the football, and they were
Yeah,
willing to concede the run towards the end of the season to try and stop Cam Ward or at least slow him down. So that's going
correct.
to make a
Great
huge
point.
difference. Which you saw that in the bowl game when they
Hmm.
didn't have to be concerned with the passing game at all. After that first series in the second half, when they saw Cam Ward was out, they loaded the box and we couldn't run the football.
Right. Well, I mean, look, those are issues on that side of the ball, and then I would say on the defensive side of the ball. Obviously you saw how many points Miami gave up down the stretch of its season as the secondary fell apart. And we can sit here and talk about how important quarterbacks are, and they certainly are. You need a trigger man on the offense. It's still the most important position on the field, Carlos. But you look at the four teams that reached the semifinals this year: Ohio State, Notre Dame, Texas, and Penn State. They rank number one, number two, number four, and number seven in scoring defense. Okay. I
Yep.
mean, all of them allow fewer than 16 points a game. Last year, the national champion, Michigan, they led the country in scoring defense, 10.4 points per game. In 2022, the national champion, Georgia, they finished fifth in scoring defense, 14.3 points per game. You want to see how Miami's ranked in scoring defense the last 9 years, Carlos? 68th this season,
I thought
25
it was
points per game.
69th because that would have been a great number. I would have been like, yo, listen, I know it was a bad year, but that's if you're gonna be ranked low, that's where you want to be ranked.
44th in 2023 with just under 23 a game, 67th in 2022, 84th in 2021, 51st in 2020. They haven't been top 30 basically
2017.
since Manny Diaz was basically the defensive coordinator. You have to go back to 2019, Manny Diaz's first season when they were a top 25 scoring defense. They were 23rd that year. So the bottom line is you haven't really done a good enough job on that side of the football now for 5 consecutive years to even really consider yourself a contender for a championship. We know it starts with defense, right? Like Ken Dorsey was great, Willis McGahee he was great, Andre Johnson was great. But I'm pretty sure that if you were to do a draft, like I'm pretty sure Vince Wilfork, Jonathan Vilma, Antrel Rolle, and Ed Reed would all have gone before those guys. Defense is more important. And
Yeah,
while
well, listen, I think there's a stat that I've seen that says the 2001 Hurricanes would have been an 8-win team even if the offense hadn't scored a single point all year.
hmm. Yeah, and that's accurate. And the point here is just there's work to be done on that side of the football, and Mario has done some of it already, bringing in four DBs that three of them who by the way have 3 years of eligibility left. So this isn't just a you're going out there and getting guys that have played and performed elsewhere and they're going to be gone after a year. You've got guys that are going to be here for a while. Again, we're going to get into the 25 roster, but I wanted to touch on a couple more, sort of numbers and things regarding this season. First of all, when you start looking ahead to this roster and what's actually coming back, Carlos, I did this research the other day. Uh,
Better
of
you
the,
than me.
of the 15 high school recruits Mario signed in the class of 2022, how many do you think are still at Miami?
6, 5. Damn, I was close.
Wesley Bissainthe, Markeith Williams, Matthew McCoy, Ahmad Moten, and Inez Cooper. How many of the 26 member 2023 recruiting class is still here in Coral Gables?
26 member. I would say 15.
13.
Like, I'm right there, bro.
Most of those guys are backups, and you have Francis Mauinoa, Ruben Bain, and Mark Fletcher. Those are the headliners. All right. So what does that tell you, Carlos? There's a lot of pressure on Mario to not only hit in the portal this year, but the 2024 class, which just got here, the guys that have OJ Frederic, the class that had Elijah Lofton, Jordan Lyle, JoJo Trader, those guys have to become starters pretty quickly, right? Justin Scott, all those guys on the defensive line that they brought in, Cole McConaughey, because a lot of the guys that came in his first couple classes are already gone. They already left via the portal. They never really found a fit here. So you got 18 guys essentially, five from the 2022 class and 13 from the 2023 class. Imagine that. 18 guys from Mario's first two recruiting classes are still here. And you've basically got two portal guys from that class. One of them's Ahmad Akeem Mesidor, and I forget who the other one is. I'd have to go back and look at it specifically. But you basically had 20 guys from those first two classes still around. So it's all about 24. It's all about the guys that he gets in this portal in terms of building depth and having success for next season. Does that make you nervous? That the fact that I just provided you that research, what does that make you feel right now?
It's concerning because what you hoped for and what you thought was that the recruiting was going to be good enough, that the talent was going to be good enough that yes, you're going to have to fill in pieces with the portal, but then eventually those younger guys that you brought along or you brought into the program were going to be able to step in and replace the portal guys as they exited. That you weren't going to be having to rely on the portal as heavily moving forward, like Mike Norvell did at Florida State, and we saw what kind of a disaster that ended up being this past season when you don't build from within consistently and have a strong enough foundation. So for me, it's concerning from a longevity standpoint because eventually, if you keep taking portal guys and you keep, losing recruits and losing guys that you recruit and bring into the program on a consistent basis and are left basically with less than 50% of your recruiting class year after year and having to replace them with portal guys, eventually recruits are going to turn their heads at you and say, I don't want to be there. There's a reason why guys are leaving, right? I'm not getting opportunities or young guys aren't getting opportunities because you're replacing them with portal guys. You're relying on that more than you are recruiting. So why should I go somewhere where I don't think I'm going to be long term? But it's also affecting the culture of the program because there's not enough consistency within the program in terms of how you build that culture out. Because there's not the guys aren't there long enough to build that culture and that stability and really pass down what it means to be a hurricane. And what Mario wants to build internally in terms of the way he wants that program to run and look and feel like. So it's concerning on many levels. But I mean, at some point, you're going to have to rely on the guys you recruited, right? And I think the quality of players seems to be improving because I think that 24 class, although not a lot of guys started from that class, very few did. A lot got reps, a lot got snaps down the stretch, especially. And I think you're going to see an impact from those guys moving forward in the coming year. But it has to be more consistent. He really has to hit on those guys. And I think supplementing them with guys in the portal that are maybe a little bit younger, that'll stay there a little bit longer, will help the overall culture and build that foundation. But he's got to find a way to not only recruit, but recruit his own players and make them believe in the vision to stay there long term. But everybody's having that issue across the country.
Yeah. We've got more than a dozen players who have exited. The only ones that were full-time starters or guys that saw the field significantly were two guys in the secondary. Jaden Harris, who ended up going to Georgia, where I think he's going to be basically a backup and a special teams player, the safety. And then Deani Hill, who left for Wisconsin. I think Miami was trying to work out a trade to get Xavier Lucas for Deani Hill, which I think that would actually be a good trade. Xavier Lucas, the former star at Plantation American Heritage, who wants to come back home if he can get himself out of that situation there. And then you had Isaiah Horton go to Georgia, so he was, a four game starter for you this past season at receiver, and a guy that would have provided some experience, but really not. I mean, you also had your tight end Riley Williams of the future, tight end of the future Riley Williams, go home to Oregon State. So, that one kind of stings because you would have been able to just kind of plug and play him. But I think he saw the writing on the wall with Elijah Lofton coming up.
Yep.
Miami went out and got Alex Bowman from Tulane, a 25 game starter in his career, including all 13 games last year for Tulane, which made the American Athletic Conference championship game. Bowman will come in. He's not highly productive in terms of catches, but in terms of blocking and everything else, he'll be in here. So those were the losses I
I think
mentioned.
it's a good red zone weapon. He had a bunch of touchdowns, didn't he?
Yeah, he had 7 touchdowns, which is good. A big-bodied guy. That was a good pickup. We already mentioned James Brockermeyer at center, CJ Daniels at receiver. To me, the big pickups for Miami were on defense.
Yeah.
Emmanuel Carnley from Arizona started 6 games as a redshirt freshman this past season, played quite a bit. Charles Brantley from Michigan. He's a fourth-year junior, originally from Florida. 24 career starts under his belt, so he'll come in and provide the veteran leadership that you need in that DB room. But the other two guys, again, young redshirt freshman guys who started and played a lot. Ethan O'Connor from Washington State, 12 starts this past season, California kid, coming to the East Coast, and then Zechariah Poyser from Jacksonville State, started 13 games at safety for them. So now you add him to the secondary, and that's really going to improve things quite a bit. I think, the fact that you have some eligibility with these guys, they're not just one and done types, especially if they pan out, is going to be big for this team going forward, Carlos. All right, we've kind of touched on the 2025 roster, but I kind of wanted to go over it one time here, foul swoop, and say what we think Miami has to do here in the offseason. Quarterback, I think, is fairly obvious. You have Emory Williams, Judd Anderson, and Luke Nickel. Luke Nickel, the four-star freshman coming in from Georgia. I think at this point, the play for Miami is wait for Quinn Ewers or Carson Beck to say, we're not going into the NFL draft and we're going to come to Miami instead and try to do a Cam Ward type season.
I think the other option is, you wait till the spring and see if there's a guy that shakes out that could be a solid veteran that could help bring Luke Nickel along to be the starter early on and then give way to Luke Nickel or at least maybe split time with him down the road. I think that's the other option. It's got to be a game manager type, a guy that can be efficient, won't cost you games, but won't win you games, but be good enough to then maybe give way to Luke Nickel.
I think, the one thing I will say about the position going forward, Miami does have, I mean, Nichols a solid guy. They've also got somebody yeah, who's a part of the 2026 class that's been committed from the quarterback position now for a while. Darion Coleman from the Orlando area, highly productive kid. So I think, at least the future in terms of commitments, etc., is strong. He's a blue chipper. Darion is. He's ranked number 22 right now among all QBs in the 2026 class. So at least that looks good. But I think the smart play is to get Carson Beck. I think that's probably what's going to end up happening. Beck really injured his elbow pretty badly in the SEC championship game. Obviously wasn't around for Georgia in the playoffs. He's dating one of the Cavender twins. So I think if there's a shot at anybody, it's probably him. He's put his name into the draft. But who knows what he's going to hear from draft aficionados? He's got until February 7th, by the way, to take his name out. So this could very well play it on for a little while here.
Yeah, and it's going to be fun seeing MGK's little brother out there on the field for the Hurricanes, Machine Gun Kelly.
All right, running back, you've got Mark Fletcher, Jordan Lyle, Chris Wheatley Humphrey, and incoming freshman Gerard Pringle, speedster, who should do a pretty good job replacing Chris Johnson. Chris Johnson, trying to remember where he ended up.
SMU?
I don't
That's
know. It
just a
was
guess.
not. He has not picked a school yet, from what I've read. AJ Allen is also gone. How do you feel about running back? I feel like you probably still need to go out and add another veteran guy. You know who's available? Makai Hughes, the 1,000-yard rusher from Tulane. That's somebody I'd love to see Miami go out and get.
Yeah, it'd be great to add another guy like Damian Martinez. That would be probably the same kind of situation. We get another veteran back that can come in here and rush for another 1,000 yards. But I think you don't necessarily need a guy of that caliber. I think you could rely on Mark Fletcher and Jordan Lyle. I think you need another guy like an AJ Allen. I think he would have been great in this spot as a third back to mix in with Lyle and having maybe either Lyle or Fletcher as the featured back. I think those two guys, Lyle and Fletcher, are really good, and I think you just need a complementary third guy. I don't think you need a guy necessarily to take all the carries.
All right, good point. Let's take a look here at receiver. Eight scholarship guys right now. CJ Daniels, 30 career starts. The only other guy with a start on his resume on the Miami roster is JoJo Trader. That's it. Everybody else
Ouch.
has not started a game yet. You've got Ray Joseph, Nikar, Chance Robinson, who was on the roster this year, played 27 snaps. And then you've got the three incoming freshmen, Josh Moore, Malachi Tony, and Dalen Upshaw. My guess is Miami will still take a hard look at least at another one or two wide receivers to add to this roster from other places.
I think you need at least one more veteran guy on the outside. I think you could get away with the slot guys. I think Ray Joseph, it's his time to shine in that slot. He's got to take the opportunity and run with it. I think JoJo Trader's got the ability to be a starter. Now, does he take that next step and do what he needs to do to be that kind of a consistent guy? Who knows? I think Nikar has a shot of being good if he takes an Isaiah Horton type step. But I think at least one more guy on the outside would be helpful.
One interesting name that's out there is Malik Rutherford. He's a South Florida native, started 20 games at Georgia Tech, including nine last season. I'm not saying Miami is looking at him. I'm just saying he's a productive South Florida native who entered the transfer portal that could be out there as a potential target maybe down the road if he doesn't end up signing with another school, and I don't think he has yet.
I agree.
Uh, all right. You look at tight end. We mentioned Alex Bowman coming in. Miami's got five on scholarship right now, including Bowman. You got Elijah Lofton back. He is obviously the future there at that position, and probably getting some carries as well in the backfield. You got Jackson Carver, the redshirt sophomore, who's played 7 snaps to this point. Brock Schott and Luca Gilbert, the two four-star incoming freshmen. Is that enough for you, Carlos? Considering Miami doesn't use the tight end that much.
Um, I think they got this tight end out from the transfer portal because they needed another guy that could be an inline blocker, where I think Elijah Lofton is more of an H, obviously versatile tight end type who could play both in the backfield, play off the line of scrimmage, even split out wide as a receiver, whereas maybe his blocking isn't his best attribute. They need an additional guy to do that. So I think those two guys will be solid. I think if you're confident with the freshmen or the guys that were freshmen this past season, the guys that are incoming now, you stay pat. I think if you aren't, then I think you would go out and get one more sort of run blocker type, or do what they did a couple years ago with Matthew McCoy and use him as an extra offensive lineman in that tight end slot when they need to really beef up front and go maybe unbalanced, go a little heavier.
Okay, that makes sense. All right, on the offensive line, you've got 15 scholarship players: Markel Bell, Matthew McCoy, James Brockermeyer, Nez Cooper, Francis Mauigoa are your penciled in starters. You've got Ryan Rodriguez coming back, can play either of those inside positions, including center. Samson Okunlola still here, hasn't left yet. Five-star prospect who's going into his third year with 63 career snaps. You've got Tommy Kinsler, Derek Plaz, Nino Francavilla, Juan Minaya, and then you've got the four incoming freshmen led by S.J. Alu Fatul, the center from Las Vegas Bishop Gorman, the All-American. You've also got Max Buchanan, an offensive, big-bodied offensive kid out of the Orlando area that's a blue chipper. Those are the two guys that are sort of the high-profile additions. You mentioned getting another veteran interior lineman. I agree with you. I think if you can get one more guy to come in here and compete for a starting job, I would venture to say left tackle. Markel Bell was solid and in my right and in my eyes, I thought he was good enough. But it's going to be a different situation. There's a different quarterback next year,
Mhm.
and you're going to be running the football a lot. Linemen are likely to get hit from behind. You never know who snaps a knee. You're going to need, to me, I think that's what's missing. They need another offensive tackle. There's enough guys you can kick inside.
To me, I think Markel Bell was, he was good. He wasn't great. He was good, but I think this is his first year really playing at a high level at that left tackle spot. He was coming from a JUCO. He was still very, very raw when he came into this program, and I think playing the way he did was impressive considering his lack of experience. I think they can get him up to speed and get him to a different level. If he improves, if he progresses this coming season, I think he could be a solid starter at left tackle. You've got to let Okunlolo compete for that left tackle spot. Is he finally going to make that move and take over the job? This is year three. If not, he's got to hit the portal. He's got to find somewhere else to play because this is his opportunity, right? The only impact he's made thus far is with the pancake mix. Not really pancaking people on the field. So he's got to make that happen. But I think the one thing that's going to hold this offensive line back this year is that interior line. I don't know that you can get away with both McCoy and Cooper at guard. I think you need a third guy to come in there and start and compete, make those two guys compete for the remaining guard slot. You need a solid starter at one of the guard slots, and the other one has to compete for what's left over. And then you have your best five out there. I think that helps. I think you may, unless Ryan Rodriguez can step up and compete for one of those jobs, one of the incoming freshmen can step up and compete for one of those jobs. I don't know if they can. I think you need an experienced starter out there if you can get it.
Defensive line, you've got 16 scholarship players, assuming Akeem Mesidor decides to stay in school and not go pro. I'm assuming he is not going to go pro because I haven't heard his name attached to any draft stock. He's got 1 year of eligibility left. I know he's going to end up coming into his sixth season, so he's one of those guys who can obviously take advantage of the fact that he's been injured and missed and redshirted, medical redshirt, all that kind of stuff. I would assume he and Ruben Bain will be your two edge rushers. Miami picked up David Blay from Louisiana Tech. He was an All-Conference USA first team defensive lineman. Started 12 games last season, was productive, 46 tackles, 10 and a half tackles for locks, 6.5 sacks. He'll help replace Simeon Barrow, who was a solid pickup by Miami's coaching staff. You've got Ahmad Moten back, so I would think that would be your four down front, Blay and Moten in the middle, Mesidor and Bain on the outside. And then you got that really talented group of freshmen from this past season that came in that are going to be providing the bulk of the depth. Justin Scott, Cole McConaughey, Armando Blunt, Booker Pickett Jr., Josh Horton, Marquise Lightfoot, Artavius Jones, Elias Rudolph, Dalen Russell, and then you got three freshmen that you brought in, true freshmen that probably won't sniff the field, but are at least there to provide some level of depth in case you need them. Hayden Lowe is the big one out of California, the edge rusher. So, what do you think about the defensive line? Mario in the past has gone out and spent. I don't want to say Mario has spent, but Miami's collective has gone out and
Whoa,
spent
whoa, whoa, careful there, careful there.
extra money. Miami's collective has gone out and spent extra money, sort of adding veterans to the defensive line. Would you like to see more veterans on this defensive line?
I think they're good in this situation. I think those young guys that you discussed right now, that got some snaps this year, are going to be talented enough to come in and be rotation guys and be have confidence in them. Uh, I would normally caution and say you need another defensive tackle, but I think with Justin Scott and I think with Blunt, and I think the guys they have now and the guy they picked up from Louisiana Tech, they should be fine there. I like Mesidor and Bain obviously as the edges, and they've got plenty of guys to complement behind them that could bring in a sort of change of pace guys, third down rush guys. I think the defensive line is solid going into the season.
Linebacker, you get 1 more year of Wesley Besainth. He will be a senior next year, 26 career starts. He's got the most on the defense in terms of linebackers. You got Jalen Alderman, who could still come back. He's got 1 year of eligibility left if he wants to. I don't know that he will. 3 starts last season for Miami. Then you have Popo Aguirre and Cam Pruitt, the two young guys who I think showed some really positive flashes. Bobby Washington, Malik Bryant, Chase Smith. Darius Hayes, Kellen Wiley, and Ezekiel Marcelin are the two freshmen. Wiley and Marcelin are that are coming in the door. Your thoughts on linebacker?
I think it can't get any worse than last year in terms of middle linebacker play, right? I think Matt Winoa took a very big step back. He was one of the weaker points of the defense last season. I think if you can get a guy like Aguirre to come in there and take that slot and be competent, I think that'll help. I think that'll also help Basaint, where Wesley doesn't think he has to make every play, where he can play his role, stay within the scheme, and not try to do too much, because I think that might have hurt him a little bit last year and maybe take a big step forward his final season. I think there's enough depth with the younger guys behind them. I think having Alderman back would be good, if he could decide to stay and have additional depth. I don't necessarily think you need to go out there unless you could find a middle linebacker that's a day one starter, a plug and play for one season. I think you stay with what you have.
Yeah, I agree. There are some guys that are available that are out there that have played a whole lot of snaps. I'm monitoring the transfer portal for the Athletic and tracking over 3,000 names, Carlos, of guys that have hopped in there. And I've seen career snap counts, starts, that kind of stuff. There's certainly guys that they can look at if they wanted to bring here, but I think a lot of this is going to depend on if Derek Nicholson, the linebackers coach, is retained. I would say the same thing for Jason Taylor and whether or not he's
Yeah.
retained by the next defensive coordinator. Those are all questions that will affect the roster. Guys obviously want to come in and play for coaches that they know and are comfortable with, that they know will play them, etc. So
Yeah, the guys who recruited him.
the guys that brought him in, they want to buy into that. So we could still see an exodus, and there is a spring transfer portal window in April where guys can certainly enter, and grad transfers like Akeem Mesidor can always leave whenever they want. That's never a situation where it's just a matter of who do you sign with up with by August, and if you're on a team playing for them by August, then you can't leave. So once you play a game, that's kind of the deal. You can't switch in the middle of the season. That's the one thing that hasn't changed yet in college football.
Yeah.
Yet, yeah. The secondary, there's 15 scholarship guys right now by my count. Charles Brantley, who I mentioned earlier, Ethan O'Connor, Zachariah Poyser, Emmanuel Carnley, all of those guys started at least 6 games last season in other places. You got OJ Frederick, who started 9 games for Miami back. Jadis Richard had a pretty serious knee injury, has 1 year of eligibility left. He started 6 games for Miami. The transfer from Vanderbilt. I didn't think he was that bad, but I don't think he's probably going to be back in time for the start of the season coming off injury. Damari Brown, who was obviously really talented, but played all of 21 snaps this season, got injured in the Florida game, re-injured himself. Got Zaquan Patterson at safety, Markeith Williams, who played some, started the bowl game. Then you got Dylan Day, Ryan Mack, and then the four incoming DBs: Bryce Fitzgerald from Miami Columbus, Jabari Antoine out of Louisiana, Chris Ewald out of Hollywood Chaminade, and Amari Wallace out of Miami Central. I think, Carlos, I think this might be the best secondary in terms of talent Miami has had in a shitload of time.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I think Mario clearly saw that the secondary was a weakness. I mean, not that we alerted them to it at the end of last season, that was going to be a problem, and he should have gone on and gotten some guys. Didn't listen to us, but that's fine. They suffered the consequences of not listening to the Wide Right podcast. Um, and they finally addressed that issue, and they addressed it well. I think they got out and got the corners they needed. They also got a safety, and I think Zaquan Patterson, to me, still has the talent and the ability to be sort of the next big guy there at safety for the University of Miami, or at least be a very good player for them. So I think with the depth they're adding now, they should be all right in the secondary.
Yeah, and I mentioned Xavier Lucas. If he gets into the transfer portal, I think there's a possibility he could still end up at Miami. So, and look, you add up, you do the math, they're around 75, 80 scholarships right now. So they can certainly still add. They can go up to 105 now. You've got, the revenue sharing, all that stuff is going to be implemented here in the next year. So the roster, I think, could still be tweaked quite a bit. But right now, January 8th, this is where the Hurricanes stand. What do you think? Not even just basing it on the schedule. You mentioned Notre Dame and Florida, two early opponents for Miami. Talent wise, what would you say this roster is?
With the current quarterback, Emory Williams, 8-4.
Yeah, I would venture to say probably 7-5 even, or six and
Yeah.
six, because I don't think they have enough at wide receiver right now. I like
See, that's
JoJo
that's why I
Trader.
let you, that's why I let you do it, Manny, because I don't want to pee on the parade. I let you do that.
Yeah, I think defensively they'll be better. I think scheme wise, whoever comes in hopefully will play more zone defense than Lance Guidry did. Miami played more man than anybody else in the ACC and clearly couldn't cover anybody man to man.
Well, I think
So
that depends on, what that talent in the secondary looks like and what they're best at.
right.
It's not necessarily they need to do one thing or the other. I think whatever suits that talent in the secondary now may help. Now they may have the talent to play more man, and it would be a mistake to play zone if they're not good at it.
Well, it also depends on the amount of pressure you can create with these guys. And look, you have a foursome of guys that have played quite a bit between Moten, Bain, Blay, and Mesidor, right? But beyond that, you've got a bunch of rookies and young guys that are really going to be playing for the first time. And so to me, we'll see what kind of pressure they can create, whether or not the next coordinator decides to blitz more, blitz less maybe than the previous regime did. So all that'll be figured out. But talent wise, they've certainly upgraded the secondary. I'll give them that. But I've
Yeah.
still got my questions. I think the offensive line is solid. I think the tight end room, if Elijah Lofton stays there and doesn't move to running back, I think he is. I think it's good enough. The question is receiver and quarterback, and those are two huge. Right now, I'd give them a D in both areas because I just don't think they're very good at either position. I think in terms of depth at receiver, to me, it's talent in the quarterback room. Luke Nickel could very well be good, but as you mentioned, he's coming in as a baby freshman. Like, what are you going to expect out of that guy? It's hard to say he's going to come in here and be highly effective. And if he's not, then this is probably a 6-6, 5-7-5 type program right now.
Yeah. Listen, it's one of those things where I think it's a help if you are going to roll with Luke Nickel. Let's say if you go with the quarterbacks you have on the roster coming in, and Luke is probably going to beat out Emory Williams if he does. Hopefully he does, and he's good enough to start. You don't expect the Cam Ward numbers out of him. If he could be at least be a game manager, getting the ball to guys and not making mistakes, that's where the tight end position is going to be very important because that's a quarterback's best friend when you're young and you're trying to figure things out. Because there's always routes where you can get the ball to the tight end underneath and in space and make completions and keep moving the ball and moving the chains. So I think the system itself will have to look a little bit different depending on the quarterback. If you're going with a guy like Luke Nickel or Emory Williams, you're not going to see as many four wide receiver sets as you saw last year with Cam Ward. You're not going to see it as wide open and deep shots as you did a season ago. I think you're going to see a little bit more play action based, or you should see a little bit more play action based type of offense and using the tight ends more in the scheme than you did a year ago and using the backs also in the passing
One thing I will say, I don't think this is a 2-10 team. Just gonna
game.
say
Ooh,
that.
listen, man, why are you taking shots at your favorite team at your school?
I can't help myself. I apologize. Mike Jones, let's get to the mailbag. Mike Jones, Jonesy713 says, are we truly missing out on the portal quarterbacks, or did Miami only try for John Mateer and that's it? To my knowledge, Miami was very interested in John Mateer. They obviously had the Cam Ward connection with Washington State there, but there was never a question in my mind that John Mateer was following his offensive coordinator at Oklahoma. And so, any Miami fans who believe even for a half second that that guy was coming here, I'm sorry that you were misled. That was not going to happen. That kid was going to Oklahoma with his offensive coordinator, and that was set in stone probably even before the season ended.
Yeah,
So that's just the way things work. I think Miami took a look at Mendoza. I think ultimately, for a variety of different reasons, it didn't happen. Mendoza's brother plays at Indiana. He's got a chance to go to the Big Ten, get a starting job for a coach, by the way, who also won 10 games, and might frankly have a better roster right
I made the
now,
playoff.
and to make the playoff again next year. I think if you're Indiana. It's not necessary. Who would have ever imagined we'd say Indiana's a better football situation than Miami? But you
Christ.
look at the job this guy just did in year one, and you say, well, you just replaced the guy that they had with the Mendoza, and you say, well, they might still be pretty good next year. And I think Miami's receiver situation was a little different.
If you would have told me last year, or let's say 5 years ago, right? Just randomly drop in out of the sky, and you jump in a DeLorean, you go 88 miles an hour, you come back, you go back 5 years, and you tell the two of us while we're sitting at Flanagan's having a beer, hey, we're from the future. We're you guys from the future. SMU is going to win an ACC or get in the ACC title game before Miami goes back again. And we're like, what? What are you talking about? Are you insane? SMU is not even in the ACC. What are you saying? Bye. That's all they and you leave us like that.
Yeah,
What do you think? What do you think our reaction would be like? What the fuck? That's crazy.
that's
First
not
of all, forget that
happening.
we just came back.
We wouldn't believe it.
No, there's
Wouldn't
no way.
believe it.
Yeah,
All right. This one is from JK Slay. Hot take from JK. Within 2 to 3 years, high school QBs that are not top three will go to small Power Four FBS programs over blue bloods, play as freshmen, and then transfer after their first year for large NIL and starting roles. Smaller schools will actually sell and recruit one and done quarterbacks. I agree, JK.
yep.
I said this a couple years ago when we were going to this system that if you were smart and you were a young quarterback, instead of going to sit on the bench for 2 years, you're better off going somewhere where you can get on the field right away and then really raise the bidding price for you. I think the problem till now has been the bag, right? Everybody wants to get the bag. Everybody wants to make a certain amount of money. And by the way, I'm glad I mentioned the bag because Grace Rayner and I went to the Under Armour All America game, wrote another piece for the Athletic talking about NIL and expected salaries for quarterbacks signing with major Power Four schools and all positions really. I got some great intel there from talking to guys one on one and granting them anonymity. But to give you an idea, I do think it will evolve, especially with revenue sharing. I think when you say go to small Power Four FBS over blue bullets, I think the Vanderbilts of the world, the Rutgers of the world, the Virginias, and the teams that are on the lower end will continue to be feeding schools for the Alabamas and the Michigans and everybody else who um, ultimately contends for championships. But those quarterbacks could help, sort of create a Cinderella run here or there for one of those teams if enough of those guys start to make those decisions. But I agree. I think there will be an adjustment, and that's what's happening in college sports throughout.
Yeah, and it's a different level of pressure and expectation at those schools
Hmm.
because you could see a school like Vanderbilt pulling off a 7-5 season or 6-6 season, right? Having an upset of Alabama, and that giving their coach an extension or giving them, the boost forward, the confidence from the administration to continue being the head coach there because they're not looking to make a playoff. They don't
Right.
expect to make a playoff. They
Right.
don't expect to win a conference championship or even make a conference championship game. They just want to be competitive and suck off the teat of revenue sharing in the SEC. And if you're at one of those programs, they'll gladly take a guy that's, a top 100 quarterback, top 50 quarterback for 1 year or 2 years to get him to that level and just keep recycling it, using the Calipari method at Kentucky, right? And helping you
Hmm.
get to where you want to go. You use each other for mutual benefit, and then you move on. Another thing guys could do is go to group of five schools, get a lot more playing time out there if you can, or go to an FCS school and maybe compete for a national championship there and really raise your profile and your price. So there's options out there for quarterbacks that want to get on the field immediately and get game experience and not have the short term thinking of I need to get paid now, get my price, and whoever offers that, that's where I go, and then be put in a bad situation where one, you don't get on the field, and two, you don't get developed, and you end up like a fucking nomad, like Jaden Rashada.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. It's, look, Malachi Nelson, who was a five-star quarterback, signed with USC. He was the number one quarterback at one point in his class. He signed with USC, transferred to Boise State this year. Now he's going to UTEP. So had he started at UTEP, then gone to Boise State and then USC, he probably would have made himself a lot more money. But who knows what kind of signing bonus he got to go to USC in the first place. So we'll see how it ends up working out. All right, this question, I can't even pronounce this guy's name. Is it Guad Norsreif? I don't even know. Frierdo 60 says,
No.
will Luke Nickel from Milton High School take over the quarterback position this spring? And then he's got a second question. Who's the best defensive coordinator available? Any update on transfer portal help? Thanks. All right. I think we've kind of addressed the transfer portal stuff. Luke Nickel, you kind of touched on it, in terms of what he could potentially be at Miami. I think if he takes over as quarterback, he could win the job out of the fall, especially if Emory Williams is crap and Miami doesn't get somebody in the portal that's better. I would not be surprised to see
Unless Emory
Mario.
learns to throw a ball with laces.
Right, unless something like that happens. I will answer this question for best defensive coordinator available. People, there is so much turnover in college football year to year to year. Let me ask you, had you heard of Lance Guidry before Mario hired him?
Hell to the no.
Okay. Did you remember who Florida State's defensive coordinator was this past season when they went 13-1? Remember his
Uh,
name?
no, that was the guy. That guy's at Colorado. It was Alex something. No, I do not remember.
Adam Fuller. He was number
There we go.
six. He was number six on Saturday Down South's top 25 defensive coordinators entering the 2024 season list. He's out of a job. Number 16 on that list, Wes Goodwin, from Clemson. He just got fired as well. My point is, coordinators in college football now are sort of a dime a dozen. It used to mean something. It used to mean something when you could bring in a defensive coordinator who was elite because he might stay at your school for 3, 4, 5 years, help put a bunch of guys in the NFL. There is a constant, I mean, constant revolving door at the coordinator positions. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that rosters are changing consistently. Players are no longer staying in the same place. I just went over the roster for Miami, the high school recruits. I mean, a bunch of those guys are gone from the first two recruiting classes. So to me, it's college football has become much more about, well, when you bring a coordinator in, what players is he bringing with him from his former school? And how long are you really going to hold them? 1 or 2 years. So I just think that's the way it is. And I wouldn't worry so much about names, is what my point is.
Yeah, and I think an undervalued part of the coaching staff and a tool that head coaches are using now that I don't know that Miami's done a good enough job of using is the analyst position, right? A lot of schools are
Yep.
using veteran coaches, head coaches, guys that just want to part-time it now, that would rather spend more time on a golf course and breaking down film, but could still offer you insight and years of experience in the way they did things and the way they run a program, the way they run schemes. Teams are taking advantage of that, and they should try and look into that and get a veteran guy like a Gary Patterson to come in and help whoever the next defensive coordinator is. If you want a young guy, to come in and he's a Hellcat when it comes to recruiting, does a great job bringing in players. He's got a lot of upside to him. You want to catch him before he skyrockets into that next sort of hot name to be searched for in terms of head coaching positions or coordinator positions. and you think he needs some assistance, I think that's the way you go. You get a younger guy that can recruit, that can relate to the players, and have an older guy there as an analyst that can assist him and help him break schemes down and say, listen, this is how we would run it. This is how I would do it. This is where I think your flaws may be in terms of the way you're operating the scheme and your call sheet. Come together and work as a group to come together with a call sheet for Saturday and build it that way.
Look, I know Mario certainly has talked to guys. Santucci from Georgia Tech, I think, was somebody he interviewed and spoke with at some point. Um, there are other guys here. I'm looking at my list of notes here from some conversations. Let's scroll down here for a minute. I know the Tennessee defensive coordinator Banks was a name that was out there. Look, a lot of this stuff is put out by agents, to try to get these guys raises too. That's something else that happens. So, look, Mario, we know how Mario operates ultimately.
Slowly.
He takes his time, right? I think certainly the quarterback situation was that way too in the past. He likes interviewing guys, getting a feel. This isn't he doesn't have a love affair with defensive coordinators the way he does with Jason Candle at Toledo. Like if he could always make Jason Candle's offensive coordinator, I'm sure he would.
Yeah, he's
I
got a
I
candle for Jason Candle.
I,
That's the candle in the wind.
I think there's defensive guys that he likes that he's had conversations with in the past, but some of those guys don't want to wait around and wait for him to make a decision. So we'll see who he ends up with. In the end, they got to continue to upgrade the talent, and they did that without the defensive coordinator in place. By the way, they got all those DBs without a defensive coordinator. Just take note of that. All right. All right, Andrew V17. Are there any quarterbacks that Miami should have been more aggressive going after? Mendoza, Mensa from Duke, Moss at Louisville. What other position groups still need to be addressed in the transfer portal, in your opinion? Appreciate the question, Andrew, and the longtime support for the podcast.
Yes, my man. Thanks, Andrew.
I would say I think Mendoza was probably one that they will regret not taking and
I
maybe
agree.
making a stronger push for, only because of how bad Emery looked. I think uh is Mendoza, Cam Ward, not even in the same hemisphere, but he's a guy that probably could have gotten you to 10 wins the same way Cam Ward did
Yep.
if the offensive line of the running game is as good as it is, right? He could have gotten you to 10 wins and made you a contender again. I think right now you don't have a contender at the quarterback position, somebody who can make you a contender.
Absolutely. And I think, even, as inconsistent as he is, I think Malik Murphy would have been better than Emery Williams coming into the season. I think you would have
Mhm.
had at least a veteran guy with some starts that's made some plays at a couple different programs at a high level um, to be there for you. But I agree. I think Mendoza would have been the logical choice just because of the South Florida connection and the fact that you knew he was going to be a guy that can operate the offense efficiently. Maybe not be a world beater, maybe not be the greatest quarterback of all time, but give you enough to help put you in a position where he's not pissing games away for you.
This is from Double Up, low key 2305, low key T 305. I'm sorry, not 2305. Uh,
Lokiti.
low key T. Do you think Dawson leaving is for the best? Cam Ward hit a lot of Dawson's flaws because he's a good player. I know it brings somewhat of a stability in the room issue as far as play calls, but should we get a new DC? A new OC rather.
Yeah, listen, you can't fire Dawson. There's no way. You can't do that after him finishing with the number one offense in the country. As much as I would like to see him go, like as much as I'm not a big fan of his. I think he's at least competent. He's not a world beater. He's not going to out scheme you. He's not going to come in with a game plan outside of the initial call sheet that he has. He's not going to adjust. He's not going to have any wrinkles. But what he comes in with usually works. Then after that, it's a crapshoot. But I think we're going to see a lot of what Shannon Dawson really is this coming season. It's year three now. He's been with the team a couple years. He's going to have a different set of ingredients. Let's see if he adjusts his system to fit the talent around him, or if he goes in there thinking that he could just roll in the same way he did with Cam Ward and things are just going to fall into place.
How ballsy would it have been for Mario to fire Dawson after the Pop Tarts Bowl and then hire Ben Arbuckle, the Washington State offensive coordinator, who would bring John Mateer with him? Is that the way coaches should be thinking now, Carlos? You think they should be thinking year to year? Let me get the offensive coordinator who's going to bring me the quarterback. It worked at Vanderbilt with Diego Pavia. They got the OC from wherever he was at, New Mexico State, and then brought Pavia in, and look what Vanderbilt did. They beat Alabama.
Yeah, your ass better get a signature from the quarterback first, or else you're going to end up with that Dan Eno situation.
That's right. That's right. Who could forget how Miami took a big whiff there with Dan Enos and wasn't able to get Jalen Hurts, right?
Yep.
All right. Stephen Garrett says, I'm sure you'll get zero questions about who will be the QB in DC. You're absolutely right, Stephen. Not one. Wayne Soflo says, "What's happening, and how do you expect the Xavier Lucas situation to end?" I reached out to Darren Heitner, who's representing Lucas right now, and trying to get to the bottom of the situation here at Wisconsin with Xavier Lucas. Uh, no explanations yet as far as why he hasn't been released and put into the transfer portal, but I suspect, Carlos, there may be some tampering issues going on.
No.
Yes.
Really?
Who would have imagined?
And you think that's going to come out to light finally? This one time? And I wonder why it's going to come to light now because, pretty much everybody tampers, but it's because it's the University of Miami that's trying to land this guy. Wow, what a fucking shock, huh?
Yeah. Wayne Soflo says, "How do you feel about Miami heading into the spring? What's the weakest and strongest position?" I think we've pretty much made that felt. What do you think is the strongest position going into next season, Carlos?
Shit, that's a good question. Dare I say secondary now? Dare I say secondary with all the guys coming in? I don't know. They'd have to prove it first, but I think that looks pretty good. I think defensive line is a good bet.
I'm gonna say running back. I think Jordan Lyle and Mark Fletcher are the two best players on offense that they have
Yeah, that's a good
in
call.
terms of skill position. Um, Ashtray, the great, says not getting a backup quarterback out of the portal last year could potentially who could potentially step in after Cam Ward leaves was a mistake. Look at what Oregon has done with Dante Moore. They have a succession plan, and Miami is rolling the dice in the portal, waiting on the right QB to enter the portal. Do you agree with that?
Well, didn't they get their supposed backup quarterback of the future that everybody was swinging on his nuts early, Reese Poffenbarger? That
Yeah.
everybody told me I was crazy when I told you couldn't throw the football. That I reviewed his tape and the guy was like you had a better chance of a one-armed man completing a pass than Reese Poffenbarger. But hey, like always, you guys think I'm crazy. You guys think I'm stupid
Oh,
until I'm not.
we're the idiots. We're the
Yeah,
idiots.
yeah, until we're not, and then they just sort of bury the evidence that they ever said this shit before. Um, guys, listen, it is what it is. I think you can't. Your succession plan should be through recruitment, not through the portal. So what you want to do is have your frontline starter like a Cam Ward, and then have the guys behind them that you've recruited to step in when they're ready to take the reins. That's the ideal situation. So right now, I think you're set up perfectly if you get the right guy in the portal to come in, be a one-year starter, and hand it off to Luke Nickel because I think you have a really solid guy coming in that could take over the program for the long term. That's the way you should do it. Not necessarily have multiple portal guys because then what you're going to do is discourage quarterbacks from coming to your program to begin with as recruits.
100% agree with that. Asher Wildman, my friend Asher from the Orlando area, says, "Happy New Year to you and Ledo. First, thanks for the great 2024 content. Thank you for that, Asher." It
You're
says
welcome.
he was upset with me. No pickleball match when I was in town for the Pop Tarts Bowl. I apologize. I was there basically for the Pop Tarts Bowl and the Under Armour All American game, and then I drove right back to St. Augustine to go be with my parents for New Year's. It was my dad's 70th birthday this year, so I had to be there for that. So I apologize, Ash. I hope you forgive me.
Yeah, he
Third,
didn't even have a beer with me in Orlando when I was there,
you did reach out to me. We were there at the same time, and we couldn't even hang out. So I apologize.
but I did
Third,
not go to the bowl game
you did not. No, you were
because I'm
having
smart.
fun. You were having fun. You knew
Yes.
where the pain was. How much does the program invest over years recruiting a high school kid with kids entering the portal after a year? Seems like what's the point anymore? Um, Get the best free agents. All right. So the question is, how much does the program invest? Yeah, you invest because no matter what, you have to do your homework, right? Whether or not you get the kid the first time, the second time, the third time, the fourth time, or the fifth time, because kids transfer that many times now, Carlos. I think what this is all about is doing your homework, scouting, seeing who can help your football program, and so that's why you invest the energy recruiting and building relationships, to answer your question.
I think that's the area that's lacking really in the recruitment process now. I think there's not enough relationship building, and I think the other thing that's lacking is I don't think there's enough alignment with culture and vision in terms of recruiting the players to your system and to your culture and your vision. I think they're taking people. I think programs are more anxious to get wins immediately, and they're more likely to overlook character flaws or mismatches in character when it comes to the values of the program to be able to get wins immediately on the field, and then they're willing to take the risk if the guy flies. You're less likely now to invest in a guy long term that a kid might be ready 2 or 3 years down the road, but he aligns with you and checks all the other boxes and is willing to wait and take the time because you need that immediate success. I think if there anybody would be able to do that and be able to wait for those guys to develop and really align the culture with the recruiting process would be Mario because of the job security he has because of the contract. But even he's feeling the pressure. He's got to come up with wins now immediately. And following a season like this, we talked about it. Year three was going to be pivotal. This is a year that he was either going to springboard or things were going to start to decline a little bit. And that, success wasn't necessarily going to be linear. You may have ups and downs until you get to that level where you're consistently elite. Now year four is going to be a huge year because he needs to back up what he did this past season with uh, a season that feels better than the way this one ended. So let's say it ends up 10-3 again, but if it's a 10-3 with a lesser quarterback, with a team that didn't expect to make a playoff, and you make the ACC title game, or you finish stronger than you did this season, then I think the mood around the program is a little bit better than it is at the end of this season.
Yeah, how you finish is everything, right? Isn't that what Mario says consistently? How you do anything is how you do everything. Well, you better do everything at the end better next year. Michael Bonassar has a question for us. M Bones 12. We rushed for 2,456 yards this season. Will we beat that mark in 2025? I can't tell you because I have no idea who the quarterback is, and you can't run into 9 and 10 man fronts if you have no quarterback.
Yeah, exactly. And yes, 2456 sounds like a huge number when you look until you look at the year's season before. Like you didn't think last season, the year before was a great rushing season. They had 2,251, so it was only a couple hundred yards off. Um,
Hmm.
so I think you're spot on. I think they're going to need a quarterback to take some of that pressure off the running back room, but I do think the opportunity for more carries is going to be there for the running backs because they're going to need it.
Yeah. Brett Peterson, B Pete 9121, longtime listener for our show, says, so how hot is Mario's seat if they only win 5 games next year due to this quarterback situation? Well, Brent, I'm glad you asked. Um, I think the earliest Mario gets fired in a 10-year, $80 million contract is year six.
Hmm.
After year six, I think if he has 4 years left and you got to pay off $32 million, that's probably more affordable than do the math. 7 times 8, $56 million. Because you got to hire somebody to replace him. And you got to pay to all his people to go away. All the money that came in are from people who believed in Mario, right? And obviously, the university as well has stepped up to the plate. But this is all of this movement was created because it was Mario, not for any other reason, in
Yeah.
my opinion.
And then what do you do then if Mario goes 5-7 and then throws up another 7-5 and by year six hasn't made a playoff or even sniffed the ACC title game?
Mhm.
Even if you terminate him, where are you going to go with it, right? If the guy that's homegrown, coming back to the program, passionate, known as a great recruiter across country, a guy that was successful at Oregon, winning Pac-12 championships, winning a Rose Bowl, can't get it done down here, then the question becomes, can anyone get it done? And are coaches going to be gun shy about coming down here? Because if Mario throws up a 5-7 and or then another crappy average season, let's say he throws up 7-5 next year, the
Right.
fan base is going to be on fire. The
Yep.
fan base is going to want him hung in effigy, right? So what coach is going to want to run into a program that has those sorts of expectations and aren't necessarily built to get to where they want to be or where they think they are? Because we may be the most disillusioned program in the country, right? We may be the program that has the most misalignment between what reality is and where you currently are, where you think you are, right?
Right.
So we still think we're the 80s Hurricanes, but we haven't been that for a very long time. We're closer to like Syracuse than we are the 80s Hurricanes.
Well,
And that's disappointing.
and we also need to see what's going to happen with revenue sharing and whether or not Miami stays in the ACC. What happens to the ACC? Do they end up, does Miami try to get into the Big Ten? How do all those things sort of affect the next few years? We will have to sit and watch. Obviously, Clemson and Florida State are still trying to get themselves out of the league. That's a backstory to watch. But I think big picture wise, when you look at Mario in this situation, you hit it on the head. Like Miami is what it's been for the last 20 years, and that's a program that wins 7 to 8 games usually. If that, 7.5 is like the over under every year for Miami. And you had 2 10-win seasons, and one of them was right now with the best quarterback, arguably, that you've had in program history in Cam Ward. And so if you can't get over the hump with that guy, when can you get over the hump? And I think the one thing that Mario's strength was high school recruiting, right? And his evaluations and building really good recruiting classes and building really strong offensive and defensive lines. I think we've now figured out 3 years in that Mario also needs somebody to help him run a defense, right? He needs somebody who can take control of that side of the football, sort of an assistant head coach, if you will, who can sort of take that from his reins and do something. And again, this isn't just Mario, Carlos. This is everybody across college football. Kirby Smart looked like the smartest guy in the room. He won the SEC this year, and then he got his ass handed to him by Al Golden and Notre Dame in the playoffs. I just think, every team is susceptible. Ohio State this year spent a boatload of money on their roster, built a super team, lost to Michigan in the regular season finale, bounced back from that, and they're probably going to win the national title now. But the point is, as you said earlier, nothing is linear. Everything
Yeah.
is choppy, right? And so for us to just sit here and just say, well, if Mario goes 5-7 or 7-5 the next 2 years, there's no way that he could ever get back on track. I think we honestly don't know what's going to happen year to year to year because college football has become college basketball. I've been saying this for a long time now. College basketball used to be able to always just pencil in Duke, North Carolina, Indiana, and UCLA into the Final Four because they dominated the sport. You can't do that anymore in college football, right? Like college football used to be able to do that. You can't do that anymore because quarterbacks change schools every year, coaches change schools every year from a coordinator perspective. You lose receivers, you lose DBs, you lose offensive tie. Everybody goes in the portal to make more money. So until something stabilizes, I think the only thing we can do as fans and as reporters and media and people who follow the sport is say, expect the unexpected.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that the playoff has revealed thus far is also it's like we've talked a lot about it during conference play. It's a matchup thing. If you're matched up with a team that may be really good, but man, there's something about them that you could take advantage of. Like I wouldn't have expected Penn State and Notre Dame to be in the Final Four. I would not. I would not have picked those two teams.
Hmm.
I could see Texas and Ohio State. I thought they might have played for the national championship. That I could accept. That I could take. I knew those teams were going to be good coming into the season the way they played in the regular season.
Right.
But Notre Dame to me, I thought was overhyped all year. They're in the Final Four. Penn State to me, I didn't think were that good. I think they were good, solid, but not elite Final Four type. But they're there. So it's one of those things that you need. There's a lot of different factors that go into it now. When you're talking about tournament play, it's not just about the talent anymore. Now it's talent plus can you get the breaks and the matchups you need to move forward.
Hmm. Yeah. And I would say I think defense still travels, Carlos, and
Yeah,
that's one thing that Miami still has not been able to get right. You kind of had something exciting under Manny Diaz because those guys created turnovers, they created sacks and tackles for loss, and it was a very aggressive defense. But when push came to shove, Mac Brown owned Manny Diaz, right? He just kept running the football down his throat, and Miami could never sort of get over that hump. Manny Diaz just never recruited on the offensive side. He married himself with Rhett Lashley, the right offensive coordinator. But again, it wasn't right. And so now Miami at least is in the game. They're spending money. They're investing in the program. Is Mario going to figure it? I can't tell you. I just know that I'd rather have a guy who cares about this university the way that he does and to have people pouring in money the way that he does than having the program go back to being what it was before, which was arrogant, thinking that, well, we're Miami. We're always going to have this tremendous talent in our backyard and people are just going to want to come play for us. They've grown past that, so that's a
yeah,
positive thing. Uh,
yeah,
but
absolutely.
but in the long run, we don't know what's going to happen, and I don't know that any coach is dependent. Look at Dan Lanning; he looked like a genius until Ohio State went into the Rose Bowl and whipped his ass, right?
Yeah,
I
matchup.
mean, I mean, it's, so to me, it's like again, Notre Dame recruits well every single year. They just never get over the hump. Well, Al Golden's coaching the defense to a high level. Penn State, right, couldn't win the big game. Playoff expands to 12. They get the right matchups. Now all of a sudden they're in the semifinals. James Franklin, all of a sudden, oh, he's a great coach again. You look at Texas with Sarkisian, he's the quarterback guru. He's gonna do a good job with offenses. All right, 2 years in a row, Texas is there. And now Ohio State, Ryan Day. Everybody wanted Ryan Day fired after the Michigan loss. He's probably
Yep.
going to win the national championship. So it's just, again, expect the unexpected, bro, year to year to year. But money, defense, quarterback, the
Yeah, and I
three
think like
factors.
like you were saying, man, it's the same thing in the NCAA tournament. Defense travels. There's going to be games where you can't hit shots.
Yeah.
There's going to be games where your offense struggles, just like Miami did against Georgia Tech, right? There's going to be even lulls during games where you might be scoring a lot of points, but you hit drives and periods, a couple series in a row where you're just not moving the football, and you need to rely on your defense. But the other thing you need to rely on is your run game, and I think that's the one area of weakness. As much as this offense produces here, as great as this offense was in terms of scoring points and putting up yards. There were times where maybe they needed to take the foot off the throttle a little bit, kill clock because they could see the defense wasn't going to stop anybody,
Right.
and start shortening the game and giving the other team less possession, but they didn't do that.
Right. I agree. And I think that goes back to coordinator and being able to adjust and what you're hiding.
Right.
Carlos, I would continue to answer questions, but it's 2:12. You and I have been at this for an hour now, and we have to go pick up our daughters from school. So I appreciate everybody who tuned in to this episode of the Wide Right Podcast. We will be back with more coverage in the off season. I'm assuming once a defensive coordinator is hired, we will come on and talk about them. Like if we're experts about them, we'll just do a bunch of homework
Yeah.
and give you our opinions. I'm sure we will talk about quarterback. We will definitely talk spring football when that comes along in March or April, whenever the hell Mario decides to do that. I will be in Charlotte again for the ACC meetings. I will be everywhere I need to be. But in the meantime, I'm going to be coaching soccer, my daughter's soccer team. I will be doing everything else that needs to be done around my house because it's spring cleaning time, brother. It's January. We got to start. It's a new year. Got to start fresh. You're going into tax season soon. We're going
Yeah.
to be busy individuals.
I'm going into hermit mode. My life ends for the next 4 months, beginning at the end of this month.
Yeah. Well, it was good seeing you. And I still owe you that Flanagan's lunch, by the way.
That's all right. I'm going to collect that Dolphin Francaise with interest, baby.
Thank you for tuning in to Wide Right, guys. We will see you next week.
Peace.